Hola, señoritas. Soy señor Maresca. ¿Cómo están? Well, this is the videos for lesson 4, Lección 4. In this video, you're going to learn the subjunctive with verbs and expressions of emotion. And it's basically the same idea that you've already learned about the subjunctive. In the video, I'm going to review the subjunctive, and then you should have your notes ready because I'm going to give you the notes for this type of subjunctive. If you have any questions, wait until class. It will give us more time to review and to practice with this type of subjunctive. Muchas gracias. Nos vemos en clase.
So here, señoritas, a mood. Remember, it's all about the attitude of the speaker toward an action. Indicative indicates facts and real information. Subjunctive expressing what may not be necessarily true. And second of all, you need to remember what a clause is. Remember, when you first learned the subjunctive, it was divided into two clauses. A clause is a group of words that contain both a conjugated verb and a subject. So we have the main clause and the dependent or subordinate clause. This is how you remember to set up the subjunctive. And then finally, señoritas, we have the formation of the present subjunctive. Remember, regular verbs uses the three-step process. The O form of the present indicative, drop the O and add the vowel opposite the conjugation. Remember, in the present indicative, yo form, almost every single verb ends in an O, in the vowel O, except for the irregulars. There are 5 irregulars, like the verb ser, whose yo form is soy. Those will be irregulars in the present subjunctive, so please review those. And then finally, we have the stem-changing verbs in the subjunctive. AR and ER verbs that stem change in the present indicative will stem change exactly the same in the present subjunctive. However, the IR verbs, you need to be careful with those. IR verbs that stem change in the present indicative will stem change in the present subjunctive, but in every single person, including nosotros and vosotros. And now we have our first use of the subjunctive and noun clauses with expressions of will and influence, verbs and expressions of will and influence. Please remember how the subjunctive is set up. We have the two clauses, the main clause and the subordinate clause. And those clauses are separated by the word que. The main clause, please remember, the verb in the main clause is in the indicative. It's here, right here in the subordinate clause that we have the subjunctive verb, the present subjunctive. So, Marta espera que yo vaya al lago este fin de semana. She hopes that I go to the lake this weekend. But then again, I don't know, I may not go. You don't know, I don't know, no one knows. The future is a mist. And that is the idea of the subjunctive. The future is a mist. Oops, there we go. So with that in mind, we're going to continue now, and this is where you're going to start taking your notes with noun clauses, the subjunctive and noun clauses. However, now we're going to see verbs and expressions of emotion. So once again, we have the main clause. The main clause this time is going to be one of emotion or feelings such as hope, fear, joy, pity, surprise, etc., which will trigger the subjunctive in the subordinate clause. You must have a change of subjects though. Remember, the main clause will have one subject like yo, and the subordinate clause will have another subject like do. And you'll see that in the examples coming up. So here are some examples. We begin with the main clause, nos alegramos. Nos alegramos, we're happy. It's full of emotion. Que, and then we change subjects, right? You see that? We now have flores. Que te gusten las flores. And here we have the subjunctive verb. We're happy that you like the flowers. Take a look at this one now, this example. Everybody remembers how to say, I'm sorry, lo siento. Well, here we have, I'm sorry, using the subjunctive. Siento que no puedas venir mañana. I'm sorry that you cannot come tomorrow. Well, just because I'm sorry that you can't come, you may wind up coming. I don't know. It's all about the future. You may come, you may not come. Who knows? The future is a mist. Okay, now we have a couple more examples. We have, temo que Ana no pueda ir mañana con nosotros. Temo comes from the verb temer. It's like tener miedo de que. Whenever we're afraid or fear something may happen, doesn't mean it's going to happen. We don't know. As again, the future is a mist. So, temo que Ana no pueda. Here is your verb in the subjunctive. Please remember that the main clause verb is indicative. Then we have the next example right here with the verb sorprender. Le sorprende a María que Juan sea tan joven. This verb is just like the verb gustar. So there's only two forms, sorprende and sorprenden. The le refers to Maria. It surprises Maria that Juan is so young. This is full of emotion, so that's the reason why the verb sea is used in the subjunctive. So here we have all the common verbs and expressions of emotion. Please remember that these verbs will be used in the main clause. Alegrarse de, esperar, gustar. And a good example, gustar. Remember, me gusta el fútbol. Now we're going to say, me gusta que Juan juegue al fútbol. I like that he plays football. Or no me gusta que mi hija salga con un chico de brophy. I don't like that my daughter goes out with a brophy guy. Things like that. And then we have molestar. Please remember, molestar does not mean what it looks like. It means to bother. So we will use gustar and molestar the same way. Me molesta que mi hija salga con alguien or con un chico de brophy. Same thing with sorprender too. So these verbs right here are just like the verb gustar. And now we have some expressions of emotion, like extraño, es extraño. Remember, you need to have that que. Es una lástima. That's a very common expression. Es una lástima que Juan no pueda ir con nosotros. It's a shame he cannot go with us. Es ridículo, es terrible, es triste. And then we have this expression, Señor Maresca's favorite expression, ojalá. Let's practice. Ojalá, ojalá. And you can use it with the K or without the K. And I'll show you some examples coming up. So here's a good example using molestar. Remember, molestar does not mean what it looks like. It means to bother. Me molesta que la gente no recicle el plástico. Well, just because it bothers me that people don't recycle, do I know for a fact that all the people don't recycle? No, I don't know. It just bothers me that people don't recycle plastic, especially plastic. Now, another example is with es triste que. Es triste que tengamos problemas con la deforestación. It's sad. In other words, it's full of emotion. Right here, we change subject, so therefore the subjunctive must be used. So, with that in mind, you need to remember, just like we learned in expressions of will and influence, the infinitive, not the subjunctive, is used after an expression of emotion when there's no change in subject from the main clause to the subordinate clause. And we're going to see some examples of that. So take a look at this example. Me alegro de estar aquí. Here's the infinitive. Why is the infinitive being used here? Because I did not change subject. It's all about what I'm happy about. I'm happy to be here, in other words. Me alegro de estar aquí. But we have this right here. Me alegro de que mi novia esté aquí. I'm happy that she's here. My girlfriend is here. There's the change in subject, so the subjunctive must be used. And now we have my favorite expression in Spanish, ojalá. And ojalá comes from the Arab language, which means, and you can hear the word, if you pronounce it right, ojalá, ojalá, you can hear Allah, Allah in the expression ojalá, which means God. And so originally it meant that may God grant, but the book changed it and said I hope or wish, and is always, and this is important to remember, is always used with the subjunctive. And you cannot, it's an expression, you cannot use a yo form, a tu form, an el form. It's just simply ojalá. I personally like to think that may God grant. Ojalá que llueva café en el campo. May God grant that it rains coffee beans in the fields. So now we have two examples of ojalá. And remember, ojalá is usually used with the K, but doesn't have to be. So that's why that's in parentheses. Ojalá que se conserven nuestros recursos naturales. I hope, or as Señor Maresca likes to say, let God grant that natural resources will be conserved. Let God grant. And our last one is ojalá que recogen la basura hoy. Let's hope, or let God grant that they collect the garbage today. But then again, they may not. They may be on strike. Who knows? I don't know. You don't know. No one knows. The future is a mist. So practice with ojalá, as we will do in class. Muchas gracias, señoritas. Nos vemos en clase.